I was about to board a flight for a business trip when I checked the home cameras. Pitch black. I immediately returned home, only to find my trembling husband blocking the locked bedroom door. It was a muggy late afternoon in Chicago, heavy clouds hanging over the balcony of our Lincoln Park condo. Traffic was bumper to bumper after a long workday. My name is Lauren Davis, 36 years old, working as a content production manager at a media agency. My husband is Vincent Miller, 3 years older, working in commercial furniture sales. Outsiders always praised him for his mild manners and soft-spoken nature. My mother once told me that Vince looked like a kind-hearted man. A man does not need to be a smooth talker as long as he knows how to love his wife. I believed that saying for nearly 10 years. When we were newly married, we rented a tiny apartment in Rogers Park. The place was cramped, the stove right next to the bathroom door. Every time I seared cheap burgers, the smoke alarm would go off. Vince would wave a towel to clear the air, laughing, saying the neighbors probably thought we were running a barbecue joint. I glared at him but felt happy. We were broke but happy. The kind of joy where two people still knew how to share the last good bite of food. On months when we were almost out of cash, I would make a box of mac and cheese and slice up a single hot dog. I would scoop the biggest slices into his bowl. He would scoop them right back into mine. He told me to eat up because I had to work the next day, laughing easily. He claimed a guy could survive on tap water alone. I told him to stop bluffing, but I loved him deeply for it. I used to think that if a poor couple still loved each other, then later, when they got wealthy, nothing could tear them apart. Owning a condo later became our biggest dream. My parents, living in rural Wisconsin, sold a portion of their orchard to gather the down payment for me. My father, David Davis, was a man of few words. That day, he slowly warned me that what they were giving was for me alone. It was great that my husband and I loved each other, but paperwork and finances needed to be crystal clear. I listened, but my heart was so full of joy that I only smiled. I thought my dad was just getting old and overly cautious. Vince stood next to me, holding my hand tightly, telling my parents not to worry, saying that as long as he was breathing, he would take care of Lauren. My mother, Karen, wiped the corners of her eyes upon hearing that, and I felt my heart melt. There is a saying about marriage being a true partnership, and I believed that once we were husband and wife, a name on a deed did not need to be fiercely divided. Therefore, I agreed to put the condo in both our names. Vince hugged my shoulders and whispered a thank you for trusting him. I naturally replied, "Who else would I trust if not him?" Looking back, I finally understand that trust is a key. Hand it to the right person, and it opens the door to a home. Hand it to the wrong person, and it opens the door to a storm. When we got the place, we were not well off yet. Vince installed some kitchen shelves himself, but they were so crooked that the sugar jar kept sliding to one side. I teased him, asking how a guy in the furniture business could install shelves so poorly. He scratched his head and laughed. Those little jokes used to make the house feel alive. Barnaby the cat was just a skinny orange and white stray we found in the parking garage, meowing until his voice was hoarse. Vince was the one who picked him up first. He asked if we should keep him, saying a cat would make the house livelier. I smiled and said we could, as long as he scooped the litter box. He patted his chest, claiming it was no big deal. Of course, the person scooping the litter most of the time ended up being me. But back then, the condo was filled with the sound of a cat running, a husband opening the door, and the click of the coffee maker. It was enough. My mother-in-law, Barbara Miller, visited for the first time, walked around the place, and smiled. She said a daughter-in-law who knows how to build a home is a blessing. She said she was proud that Vince married me. I politely replied that we were lucky to have the support of both sets of parents. She nodded, then added that a smart woman knows how to keep the house peaceful. She said a husband works hard out in the world, so when he comes home, there should be a warm dinner waiting, and a soft-spoken wife makes everything right. At the time, I just smiled, thinking my mother-in-law was speaking from old-fashioned traditions. I did not know there was already a mold set in that sentence. And one day, when I stepped out of that mold, I would become an unreasonable person in her eyes. During those first few years in the new condo, I truly thought my life had entered a peaceful chapter. I went to work in the morning, and Vince went down to the garage to get the car. In the evening, he would stop to pick up a slice of pizza or the blueberry muffin I liked. With Barnaby sunbathing by the window, I believed my home was the safest place on earth. I believed the person lying next to me every night was the last person who could ever hurt me. But I wanted peace and quiet, but a storm was already brewing inside my own house. There are winds that blow from the very depths of the people inside your house. This condo did not just magically appear. It did not fall from the sky, nor was it built on a few encouraging words between a husband and wife. It was traded for my parents' sweat. It was built on the months I worked overtime until my eyes blurred, and on the countless times I told myself to push a little harder so we could have a place to return to. My dad had a piece of land in Wisconsin. It was not huge, but it was an inheritance from my grandparents. There were some apple trees, a row of berry bushes, and tall grass in the rainy season. When I was a kid, I used to follow my mom out there to collect eggs from the chickens, pick fresh vegetables, sometimes running barefoot until dark. Yet, when I announced I wanted to buy a condo, my parents discussed it and decided to sell a portion of that land. I remember the day my dad called me home. Dinner that night was pot roast, mashed potatoes, and green beans. He did not speak right away. He just kept serving me food, while my mom kept looking at me with red eyes. I put my fork down and asked what was wrong. My dad sighed. He said they planned to sell the back lot to give us extra money for the house. I was startled and told them they absolutely could not do that, as it was their land. My dad finally spoke up, his voice slow and raspy. He said keeping the land was ultimately for me anyway. If I needed it now, they would sell it, as long as I had a decent place to live, which would bring them peace of mind. I choked up. Vince, sitting next to me, looked visibly moved. He stood up, poured my dad a glass of iced tea, and expressed his deep gratitude. He promised he would never let Lauren suffer. My dad looked at Vince for a long time, the deep, non-threatening look of an experienced man. Then my dad said he did not need big promises. He just needed Vince to live decently. A poor marriage is not scary. What is scary is forgetting your morals once you get wealthy. Vince nodded continuously, promising to remember. My parents wired me $60,000. My hands shook when I saw the bank notification. It was not just money. It was a piece of land, a piece of my parents' lives. I told Vince that my parents gave this to me, but I wanted us to use it for the down payment. The house belonged to both of us. Vince held my hands, eyes tearing up. He said since I trusted him so much, he would never betray me. I believed him. I believed him so much that when the escrow agent asked whose names would be on the deed, I did not hesitate to say both of our names. Vince turned to look at me, his expression showing he had just been handed something massive. He whispered that he would make it up to me, and once his business took off, he would take care of everything. I smiled, saying a husband and wife should not keep a tally as long as we loved each other. Looking back, I was so naive that if someone tried to sell my naivety, no one would buy it because the world is already full of it. But at that moment, I truly believed the man who ate cheap mac and cheese with me at the end of the month would never calculate against me. When Barbara found out the condo was in both names, she was thrilled. She called me, her voice as sweet as honey. She said I did the right thing. Husband and wife are one, and separate names only cause drama. She said having Vince on the deed would give him a sense of responsibility. I agreed. And then she added that my parents were lucky to have a daughter who helped her husband's family so much. I was a true blessing to their family. I felt a little hurt but brushed it off. I thought my mother-in-law was just happy for her son and did not mean anything deep by it. People often say talk is cheap, but some words cost a lot once you truly hear them. They cost your entire capacity for endurance. From the day we moved in, the monthly mortgage was around $2,800. My salary was steady, and my project bonuses were decent, so most of the bank payments came from my account. Vince contributed, but the amounts varied wildly. Once, I gently reminded him to transfer his share early because the bank auto draft was the next day. He stopped eating, forcing a smile. He said he remembered, but clients were paying late. He asked me to cover it and promised to make it up next month. Looking at him, I felt more pity than anger. I told him it was fine and not to stress too much. He sighed, saying he was the husband, and letting me handle the heavy lifting made him feel ashamed. I placed my hand over his. I asked what there was to be ashamed of. It was our home, and whoever had the money contributed. I told him to stop overthinking. Those exact words later became the needles that turned around and stabbed me. Because I had erased the boundaries so many times with my own hands, allowing others to cross them, all while thinking it was love. It was not just the mortgage. I often took on the financial burdens of his family. Vince's younger sister, Natalie, was married with kids but would call every few months. She would ask to borrow money because her kids needed school supplies and they were tight on cash. Sometimes it was $200, sometimes $300, once even $500. I asked Vince, and he just sighed. He said Natalie was struggling, and if I could help, I should do it for his mother's sake. I transferred the money without calling it a loan or bringing it up again. When Barbara knew, she said siblings helping each other was a blessing, and she was glad I was so generous. Over time, my generosity became an expectation. Paying the mortgage meant I was good at managing finances. Helping my sister-in-law meant I knew my place. Giving my mother-in-law money for her prescriptions meant I was doing my part. But if I was tired or complained, I would hear that all women have it hard, and having a house and a husband meant I had it better than most. One evening, I sat at the dining table checking my bank statements. The mortgage had just been deducted. Barnaby jumped onto the chair, rubbing his head against my arm. Vince walked up from behind and placed a mug of hot chamomile tea on the table. He told me to drink and asked why I looked so tense. I smiled, saying I was just doing the math and this month was a bit tight. He sat down next to me, telling me to hang in there. He promised that in a few years, he would get a promotion and take care of me. He asked me to trust him. I looked at our signatures on the closing documents, my heart softening. I told him I still trusted him. That night, I locked the documents safely in a filing cabinet. I thought I was guarding the paperwork of a warm home. I never expected that one day, those very documents would be what I had to grab while fleeing the place I considered safest. After settling into the condo, I thought my life would just go in a straight line. Work in the morning, cook dinner in the evening. On weekends, we would mop the floors, wash the curtains, give Barnaby a bath, and lay together watching TV. A normal life like that might sound boring, but to me, it was a blessing. Then Vince started changing. Initially, it was small things. He came home later, his dress shirt smelling of smoke, even though he rarely smoked before. One night, he walked in at 10 o'clock, looking exhausted, holding a lukewarm cup of coffee. I looked out from the kitchen and asked if he had eaten. I told him there were leftovers in the fridge. He took off his shoes and answered dismissively. He said he ate with clients, telling me to sleep first and not wait up. I looked at the untouched dinner on the table, my heart skipping a beat. Previously, no matter how busy he was, Vince always called to let me know. He used to say making his wife wait for dinner was a cardinal sin he dared not commit. Yet lately, he was forgetting it naturally. His phone also started being placed face down on the table. While eating, watching TV, or going to the bathroom, his phone followed him like a shadow. I once joked lightly, asking if he was in commercial furniture or working a 911 dispatch, since the phone never left his hand. Vince flinched, then laughed. He said clients were demanding these days, expecting instant replies, and a slight delay could lose a deal. I stopped talking. They say when a husband is irritated, a wife should speak less. But the truth is, a wife stays quiet not because she lacks arguments, but because she wants to keep the peace in her home. One evening, while hanging laundry on the balcony, I heard Vince on the phone in the living room. His voice was low but tense. I heard him say he knew, asking for a few more days, and strictly demanding they not call the house. I stopped dead in my tracks. Barnaby rubbed against my leg and meowed. Vince immediately lowered his voice. When I walked in, he had hung up. I asked who called. He said it was a difficult client rushing a quote. I looked at him. He avoided my gaze, picking up a glass of water and taking a long gulp. I pointed out that the tone he used for a client sounded awfully intense. Vince set the glass down, looking annoyed. He said I worked in media and should know clients aren't always sweet. He told me he was exhausted and asked me to stop interrogating him. That sentence shut me up. Not because I was wrong, but because I feared becoming the nagging wife. Women are strange. We get hurt by someone and then ask ourselves if we were being too unreasonable. We truly are a species with a remarkable ability to self-blame. After that day, Vince started talking about starting a side hustle. He said working for a salary would never make us rich. A man nearing 40 without a breakthrough was a failure. During dinner one night, he put a piece of chicken on my plate and said he planned to partner with some friends to open a local bar and grill. He claimed the market was booming. I asked how much capital was needed and if it was a sure thing. He frowned. He asked what was ever a sure thing, saying I was always too afraid of risks. I softened my voice, saying I was not stopping him, but we still had the mortgage. I told him to calculate carefully and absolutely not take out high-interest loans. Vince dropped his fork and gave a cold laugh. He said I was so good at calculating that it made him feel useless. I froze, saying I did not mean it that way. He rubbed his face and sighed, apologizing, saying the pressure was getting to him. I softened again. I thought his pride was hurt because his income was lower than his wife's. I thought men stumbled sometimes, and a wife's patience was all it took to get through. Back then, I had a very systematic way of convincing myself, practically building an Excel spreadsheet of forgiveness. I only found out later that when he mentioned pressure, his debts had already spiraled. Vince invested in the bar with two friends. At first, they painted a beautiful picture of huge crowds and quick returns. But the economy shifted. The bar sat empty, and the commercial lease still had to be paid. The staff needed their checks. Before recovering from that, he listened to a friend about day trading stocks and crypto, promising a quick way back to the green. There was no green. He was drowning, covering one debt with another, borrowing from friends, getting cash advances, owing shady lenders. It totaled $35,000. It is not a number that kills a person, but it is enough to make a prideful man lose sleep every night. Vince did not tell me. He still wore his crisp dress shirts to work, still smiled at the neighbors in the elevator, still bought me coffee on Monday mornings. But in his eyes, there was a shifty look, like a man hiding a lit match in his pocket, terrified of catching fire. One day, Barbara called. She usually called in the evening to chat about her back pain or her neighbor's new air fryer. But that day, she asked a very strange question. She asked if Vince was tight on money lately. I was folding clothes and stopped. I asked why she would ask that. She stayed quiet for a few seconds, then forced a laugh. She said it was nothing, just that he called less often, and she worried work was tough. I asked if Vince had told her something. She quickly denied it, telling me that my husband was under pressure making money, so I should be gentle at home. She said men sometimes do not want their wives to know their struggles. I agreed politely, but I felt uneasy. Her words sounded like advice, but felt like a cover-up. That night, I asked Vince if he was hiding any financial troubles from me. He was looking at his phone and immediately locked the screen. He asked who told me what. I watched that motion, my heart turning a bit colder. I said no one told me. I was just asking. He stood up, walked to the balcony, and sounded irritated. He said he was exhausted enough, and coming home to suspicion made it hard to breathe. I followed him and saw him light a cigarette, the smoke blurring his face under the yellow balcony light. I stood right behind him, only a few steps away, yet he felt incredibly distant. I used to think a husband and wife sharing a bed could not have massive secrets. It turns out someone can lie right next to you, but their heart is locked with a different passcode. And when a man starts placing his phone face down, often what is hidden is not just the screen, but the truth. Haley Smith appeared at Vince's company on a Monday morning. Vince was managing the commercial office furniture division, and Haley was a new intern transferred to his team. The first time he mentioned her, I was washing vegetables in the kitchen. He said his department got a new intern, a sharp girl who knew how to talk to clients. I casually asked her age. 24, he said. Fresh out of college, green but eager to learn. I smiled, telling him to train her properly and not act like a strict boss to scare the kid. Vince laughed, saying everyone knew he was easygoing. I turned around, pointing out he was only easygoing with strangers, but super strict with me. He walked over, put his arm around my shoulders, and joked that he had to be strict with his wife, otherwise she would walk all over him. I pushed him away, laughing. At the time, it felt like harmless banter. Thinking back, I realized that within a man's jokes there is often a truth we do not want to hear. Haley was manipulative in a way that perfectly touched upon what others lacked. She was not stunningly beautiful, but she had eyes that always looked like she was about to cry. Her soft voice and texting style made an insecure man feel suddenly important. Initially, her texts to Vince were just about work. I accidentally saw messages pop up on his screen. She asked if a quote looked okay, asking him to teach her how to talk to clients because she was afraid of messing up and affecting his reputation. A few days later, the tone shifted. She messaged that she was lucky to have his guidance or she would have quit. She claimed no one in the company had his vision. I saw it but did not think much of it. A young intern flattering her boss is normal in corporate America. If everyone acted like a freezer, the office would be a morgue. But Vince did not brush it off like I did. Those compliments arrived exactly when he was drowning in debt. At home, I advised him to be careful and avoid loans. Out there, Haley told him he was a genius whose wings were clipped. One night, Vince came home late, smelling faintly of alcohol. I handed him a glass of ginger ale. He sat on the couch, looked at me for a long time, and asked if I ever thought he was a failure. I was surprised. I asked why he would ask that. He demanded an answer. I put the glass down, telling him I never thought that. I just worried he would rush things and stress himself out. Vince gave a cold laugh. He said in my eyes, he always needed to be reminded, to be careful, to calculate, to not borrow, to not take risks. He asked if I knew how small those words made a man feel over time. I stayed silent for a moment, then said I only spoke out of concern for our family. He did not reply. He took his phone into the bathroom for a long time. I only found out later that Haley had texted him that night saying it was a tragedy for a talented man to hold back just because he was afraid of making his wife sad. A sentence that sounded like sympathy, but was actually striking a match. Haley told Vince about her family's debts, her sick dad, her mom working retail, and how she had to work early to support herself. She did not say it all at once, but dripped it slowly. One day it was her landlord demanding rent, the next her brother's tuition. then an ex-boyfriend who scammed her. Vince listened and felt sorry for her. And when a man starts pitying a woman who is not his wife, he often grants himself the right to play the hero. One afternoon, Haley asked Vince to drive her to meet someone who could help secure capital. His name was Tyler Brooks. Vince told me he had a big client meeting downtown. In reality, he and Haley met Tyler in an air-conditioned, upscale coffee shop, the kind with fancy tables, dim lighting, and baristas speaking softly as if afraid to wake the money. Tyler, in his 40s, wearing a crisp white shirt and a shiny watch, always had a smile. He shook Vince's hand firmly. He said Haley had told him a lot, and it was a shame a guy like Vince lacked funding. Vince asked if Tyler worked for a bank. Tyler laughed, saying he was a financial consultant bridging capital. Simply put, connecting people who need money with people who have it. He smoothed out applications and pushed them through quickly. Haley sat next to Vince, pouring him water, softly saying she knew Vince had potential. He just needed a little push. Tyler nodded agreement, stating men who want to break through must seize the moment. Tyler asked if Vince had any collateral. Vince mentioned the Lincoln Park condo we were paying off, standing in both our names. Tyler's eyes lit up. He said the condo had great equity. If done right, they could pull a home equity line of credit for about $100,000. Pay off the old debts, use the rest for capital, and in a few months, pay it back. He said Vince's wife wouldn't even notice. Vince frowned, saying his wife was on the deed and would never agree. Haley glanced at Vince and smiled faintly, saying women are risk-averse. But sometimes you just have to do it and show them the results so they respect you. Tyler jumped in immediately. He said no one was asking him to do anything illegal. They just needed to prep the file, copies of the deed, both IDs, purchase agreements, mortgage statements, and signature samples. Once everything was ready, Tyler said, Vince could pick the right moment to have his wife sign a power of attorney, and it would be done. Vince hesitated, saying I was very meticulous. Tyler laughed, saying if she was meticulous, they needed to be even more meticulous. Besides, what is mine is yours in a marriage. So Vince had every right to leverage joint assets for business. Those words, every right, were the hook Vince swallowed without realizing. After meeting Tyler, Vince started paying attention to where I kept the documents. Once, he asked which drawer the condo file was in, claiming he wanted to check the interest rate. I was chopping fruit and told him it was in the home office cabinet, offering to get it for him later. He quickly said never mind. He would get it himself, telling me to keep doing what I was doing. I looked up, and he avoided my eyes. Another night, he asked me to sign an internal acknowledgement form for his company's new furniture financing policy. I read it and saw the details were incredibly vague. I asked what it was for. He got annoyed, saying I was reading too much into an internal form. I put the pen down, saying if it wasn't clear, I wasn't signing, and he should email me the official company policy. He pressed his lips together, snatched the paper, and crumpled it. He said forget it. He knew this would happen. I thought he was mad out of pride. I didn't know that behind a crumpled paper was a whole file being prepared. That night, as I sat in the living room brushing Barnaby, Vince stayed in the home office for a long time. Light spilled under the door. I heard drawers opening and closing very softly. I called out, asking what he was looking for. He replied from inside that it was nothing, just looking for an old phone charger. Barnaby suddenly looked toward that room, his tail flicking. People say pets sense strange things before humans do. At that moment, I just rubbed his head and joked about him being nosy. I had no idea that in the room just a few steps away, Vincent Miller was rummaging through cabinets to find the deed to the place I considered our sanctuary. The business trip to Miami was only supposed to last 2 days. My agency was running a media campaign for a resort. I had to fly out to meet partners and check locations. The schedule wasn't heavy, so the night before I leisurely packed my suitcase, tossing in a light jacket because of the ocean breeze at night. Vince came home earlier than usual that day. He brought me an iced peach tea, specially asking for light ice because he knew my throat was sensitive. He asked what time my flight was. 8:30. He said leaving at 6:30 would be perfect. He nodded, then pulled my suitcase into the middle of the living room, checking the wheels because I had complained they were squeaky last time. Watching him, my heart softened. Lately, he was either irritable or silent, yet that night he was oddly sweet. I figured he knew he had been distant and wanted to make amends. Women are like that. If a man is just a little decent again, our minds automatically search for reasons to forgive. That soft spot feels like a software glitch that never gets patched. When Vince went to shower, I grabbed his jacket to hang it up. A small receipt fell out of the pocket. I bent down to pick it up, intending to put it back, but my eyes caught the text. Egyptian cotton sheet set, bronze gold, $250. I stood perfectly still. We didn't need new sheets, and I hated bronze gold because it looked tacky. Vince never bought bedroom decor on his own, especially something that expensive. I looked toward the bathroom, hearing the steady stream of the shower, feeling a ripple of unease. Vince stepped out, freezing when he saw the receipt in my hand. I asked what it was. He rubbed his wet hair and laughed a bit too quickly. He said he was planning to replace our old set because he saw a sale. I questioned a $250 sale. He stepped forward, taking the receipt from my hand, his voice forced to be casual. He said it was high quality. He said I would come back from my trip to a brand new bedroom, mentioning our upcoming anniversary. He wanted to change the mood. I looked at him. Part of me felt it was bizarre, but another part wanted to believe it. Our anniversary really wasn't far off. For a wife used to self-soothing, that excuse was enough to fold up the suspicion and shove it in the corner of my mind. I smiled and told him to make sure the color wasn't too blinding, reminding him our place wasn't a 5-star hotel. Vince laughed along, calling me a strict manager. I did not sleep deeply that night. Barnaby curled up at the foot of the bed, occasionally stretching his claws into the blanket. Vince lay with his back to me, his phone face down on the nightstand. Once, the screen lit up, and he immediately reached out to turn it off. I stared at the ceiling, telling myself it was a work text. The next morning, Vince woke up early. He brewed my coffee and warmed up a pastry. He told me to eat so my stomach wouldn't hurt. Taking a bite, I jokingly asked why he was being so attentive, asking if he had a hidden agenda. His eyes darted away for a second before he laughed, saying his agenda was for his wife to have a good trip. The drive to O'Hare was busy but not gridlocked. Vince drove, occasionally asking if I packed my charger, ID, and aspirin. He was so attentive that it warmed my heart while simultaneously feeling off. Before I got out, he pulled my luggage out and hugged my shoulders. He told me to lock my hotel door at night. I nodded, telling him to feed Barnaby on schedule and not dump all the food at once because the cat was greedy. He chuckled, saying he knew, joking that I cared more about the cat than him. I laughed back. I didn't know that joke would be the last time I ever smiled at him without a care in the world. After passing security, I sat at the gate. My pre-flight habit was opening the camera app to check on Barnaby. The cat liked knocking over small plants on the dining table, so I had installed cameras in the living room and balcony. I tapped the living room feed. Pitch black. I thought the connection was weak. Restarted the app, but it was still black. The system said the device was online, but there was no image. I switched to the balcony camera. Also black. My heart started beating faster. If the power was out, the system would say offline. If the Wi-Fi was down, the whole smart home hub would disconnect. But weirdly, all other devices showed as active. Right then, a push notification popped up. Bedroom smoke detector manually disabled. I sat up straight. That sensor was hardwired to the bedroom ceiling. No one touched it. To disable it, you had to use the master app or physically unscrew it. I called Vince. It rang and rang. No answer. I called a second time. The line went busy, then disconnected. A cold chill ran down my spine. I remembered the sheet set receipt. I remembered Vince's eyes when I saw it. I remembered the phone constantly face down. All these tiny pieces suddenly formed an ugly picture. I took a deep breath and opened Vince's company directory. I called Sarah, the accountant who occasionally emailed invoices to my agency. "Hi, Sarah. It's Lauren, Vince's wife." She sounded cheerful. "Oh, hey, Lauren. What's up? I was thinking of sending some lunch over to Vince's office. Is he around today?" There was a pause on the line. "Oh, Vince took the day off today." My hand gripped the phone tight. "Off?" "Yeah. He texted me this morning saying he was taking you to the doctor and needed the whole day. Are you feeling okay?" I looked out the massive airport windows. Planes were taxiing slowly on the tarmac. People with rolling bags walked past me. The intercom announced a boarding call, completely oblivious to my world crashing. My throat was bone dry. "Oh, right, I just got my schedule mixed up. Thanks, Sarah." I hung up and sat frozen. I was at the airport about to fly to Miami. My husband took the day off, lying that he was taking me to the hospital. The house cameras were blacked out. The bedroom sensor was disabled. The new Egyptian cotton sheets. It wasn't a coincidence anymore. The intercom called my group to board. I stood up, but I didn't walk to the gate. I dragged my suitcase straight to the customer service desk, canceled my flight, and requested to pull my checked bag. The agent looked surprised, asking if I was sure since the flight was leaving soon. I nodded. I was sure. While waiting for my bag, I opened the doorbell camera app. That device ran on a separate battery. Vince rarely paid attention to it because it only faced the hallway. I scrolled to the most recent motion capture. The screen showed a woman in a floral dress, oversized sunglasses, carrying a cream-colored handbag. She stood in front of my door, pulled her mask down, and punched in the keypad code with practiced ease. The timestamp read 11:03 a.m. I couldn't hear my own heartbeat anymore. I just felt my freezing fingertips against the glass screen. The door to my condo opened for a strange woman to walk in, as if she owned the place. I replayed the video. She stood there for less than 10 seconds. She wasn't confused. She didn't look around like a lost guest. She pulled down her mask and punched the code so fast I knew it wasn't her first time. Our lock code was only known to me, Vince, and a temporary code for the cleaning lady. But the cleaner had quit months ago, and I had never seen the woman on the screen before. I zoomed in. Light blue floral dress, huge sunglasses, cream bag, young figure, wavy hair, red nail polish. She walked into my house as casually as if arriving for a scheduled appointment. I sat in the middle of O'Hare, surrounded by rolling wheels, crying kids, and boarding announcements. Everything was loud, but my ears felt stuffed with cotton. I didn't cry. I didn't scream like they do in the movies. I just felt a terrifying emptiness. I took screenshots, downloaded the video, and immediately emailed it to myself. My hands were freezing, but my actions were strangely precise. Perhaps when pushed to the absolute edge, survival instincts take over, because relying on the mercy of a traitor is overly optimistic. I called Allie. "Hello?" she answered, sounding half asleep. I kept my voice low. "Allie, I canceled my flight. I'm heading back to the condo." Dead silence on her end. "What happened?" "I saw a woman go into my house. Vince took the day off, claiming he was taking me to the doctor. The cameras are disabled." Allie was wide awake. "Where are you?" "Airport. Grabbing my bag." "Listen to me," Allie said sharply. "Do not call Vince. Do not text him. When you get there, if you feel unsafe, get out immediately. Turn on your location sharing and send it to me." I swallowed hard. "If I don't call you back soon, come to the condo." Allie cursed under her breath and spoke fast. "Don't try to play the hero alone. We aren't superwomen, even if life forces us into the lead role. Send the location now." I shared my location. Then I dragged my bag to the rideshare pickup. The Chicago air outside was muggy and hot. Traffic was backed up, horns blaring. Standing there in a sea of strangers, I felt like I had just been thrown out of my own life. The Uber driver asked where to. I gave him the Lincoln Park address. I sat in the back, hugging my purse. At every red light, I watched the video again. It got heavier every time. I didn't recognize her, but I recognized the familiarity in her movements. She knew to step slightly left so the camera would recognize her face while she typed. She knew the door stuck a bit because the lock was old. She even bent down to block Barnaby from running into the hall, as if she had seen him before. Just that motion alone stabbed my heart. Barnaby was the stray I rescued from the garage. Yet now, another woman knew to block him in the very house I bought with my parents' money and my paychecks. I called Vince again, not to ask, but to test. It rang, then went to voicemail. The second time, busy signal. I let out a dry laugh. Busy. He was very busy indeed. Busy playing husband to someone else in his wife's bed. I told the driver, "When we get there, please pull straight into the underground garage, level P2. Don't stop at the lobby." He looked in the rearview mirror. "Got a lot of bags? Lobby's easier." "It's fine. Please just use the garage." I didn't want the lobby system to ping the resident app on Vince's phone. If he got a notification, everything would be scrubbed clean before I reached the door. The car turned into the complex. The building loomed ahead, the same one I used to look forward to seeing after work. I could see the small plants on my balcony from below. The condo looked exactly the same. Houses are much better at keeping secrets than people are. I paid the driver and pulled my bag out of the garage. The air was damp and smelled of exhaust. Bob, the security guard, was at his desk and stood up when he saw me. "Hey, Lauren, thought you were out of town for a few days?" I forced a normal face. "Plans changed, Bob. Can you buzz me up the freight elevator?" Bob looked at me for a few seconds. My face must have looked terrible because he didn't press. He just nodded. "Sure thing. You need anything, give me a holler. You look a bit pale today." "I'm fine, thanks." I stood alone in the elevator. The numbers ticked up. 8, 9, 10. Every ding hit my chest like a hammer. I took the spare physical key out of my bag. I usually used my fingerprint, but the biometric lock beeps and sends a push notification. I didn't want to announce my arrival. The hallway was empty. My door was at the end. On the gray welcome mat, there were faint wheel marks from a different suitcase. The door handle smelled faintly of sweet, pungent perfume. I stood still. It was dead silent inside. No TV, no vacuum, no pacing while taking work calls, just a thick silence that made me hear my own breathing. I slid the key in. 1 turn, 2 turns. The door clicked open silently. Barnaby didn't run out to greet me. That chilled me more than anything. I pulled my bag inside and shut the door without a sound. Vince's loafers were kicked off haphazardly. Next to them was a pair of delicate, beige high heels. On the console table, those oversized sunglasses sat right next to Vince's car keys. The AC hummed from the bedroom. The living room curtains were drawn tight despite it being noon. The living room camera's power cord dangled, unplugged from the wall. The balcony camera was turned to face the brick wall, like an eye forced to look away. I left my suitcase against the wall, took my old backup phone from my purse, and hit record on the video app. I wasn't being brave. My fingertips were completely numb from fear. But I knew if I just cried today, I might have nothing left but tears tomorrow. I walked toward the bedroom step by step. The door was ajar. Inside, there was a faint rustling, like someone hastily pulling up a blanket. Then Vince's voice, low and panicked. "Who's there?" I pushed the door open. Vince stood paralyzed next to the bed. He had thrown on a t-shirt, the collar folded inward. His hair was a mess, his face ghost white. He looked at me like he was seeing a demon. "Lauren, why are you home?" I looked at him, then at the room behind him. The women's perfume was choking. On my marital bed, the brand new bronze gold sheets were a wrinkled mess under the warm lamps. I didn't answer. I took one step into the room. Vince immediately blocked my path. "Wait, let me explain. The room's a mess. Go outside. I'll explain." I looked at his trembling hand resting on the closet door and spoke clearly. "Move." Vince stood in my way, arms spread as if shielding that closet door would erase reality. He was sweating so much I could see beads on his temples. "Lauren, please calm down, let me talk." I stared at him. The man who used to peel fruit for me under the living room light, who promised my parents he'd care for me forever. Now standing here in a half-worn shirt, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Maybe when the pain is too massive, it freezes you before you can shatter. I lowered my voice. "Get out of my way." Vince swallowed hard. "It's nothing. You're misunderstanding. I invited someone over to discuss work. The room is messy. I didn't want you to see." I looked at the floor. One beige high heel lay tipped over by the bed. The other was kicked near the curtains. On my vanity was a light cream cardigan. Next to a glass of water on his nightstand was a distinct red lipstick stain. I let out a very soft, dry laugh. I didn't even recognize my own voice. "Discussing work on our bed?" Vince flinched. He reached out to grab my wrist. Not aggressively, but desperately. "Don't make a scene. If the neighbors hear, it'll be humiliating." I stared at his hand on my skin. The hand that used to carry my groceries, put cold towels on my forehead when I had a fever, and signed the closing papers with me. The same hand was now dragging me away to cover up filth in my own bedroom. I yanked my arm back. "Humiliating? You bring another woman into our house, onto our bed, and you're worried about being humiliated?" Vince lowered his voice to a beg. "I messed up. I know I messed up. But just overlook this one time. It's not what you think." I stepped past him. The cloying, sweet perfume tried to mask the familiar scent of the room. The bronze sheets. The receipt last night wasn't an anniversary prep. It was a stage he set for someone else. In that moment, I felt deeply ashamed. Ashamed not just because he cheated, but because I saw the receipt and convinced myself he was trying to make me happy. Love truly makes you blind, but waking up makes you realize you were the only one wearing the blindfold. I walked around the bed. Vince trailed me, pleading. "Lauren, stop recording. Put the phone down. I'm begging you." I ignored him, my backup phone still rolling. I panned over the sheets, the cardigan, the heels, the lipstick-stained glass, and paused on the unplugged security camera. Suddenly, a tiny sound came from the closet, like someone holding their breath but bumping their knee against the wood. I turned my head. Vince immediately jumped in front of the closet. "There's nothing in there." I looked him dead in the eye. "Then what are you afraid of?" he stammered. I just don't want you to make things worse." I stepped forward. Vince put his hand out to block me, but this time I shoved it away hard. Not a punch, just a shove forceful enough to let him know I was no longer the wife who would stand still and listen to his lies. I grabbed the closet handle. For a fraction of a second, I hoped I was wrong. I hoped it was just stuffed blankets. I hoped everything since the airport was a sick joke. But life isn't that kind. I yanked the door open. Haley Smith was curled up among Vince's dress shirts, clutching her cream handbag to her chest. Her hair was a mess, her face pale white. Her floral dress was yanked sideways, the straps falling off her shoulder. The sunglasses I saw on camera were by her feet. She looked at me, lips trembling. "Lauren." I didn't respond immediately. I looked at her closely. Pretty, in a way that knew she was young. On the street, I wouldn't have remembered her face. Yet today, She was sitting in my closet amidst the stench of betrayal. Vince dropped to his knees. Lauren, I'm sorry. It was a moment of weakness. I don't love her, she initiated it. I was drunk. I was weak. I couldn't stop. Haley whipped her head toward him. The fear on her face shattered, replaced by sheer spite. Vince, how could you say that? Vince hissed at her. Shut up. I looked at the two of them. My husband and his mistress, standing in my bedroom, fighting over who was less awful in a disgustingly awful situation. I suddenly found it funny. Turns out, when caught red-handed, their epic romance wasn't very deep. It ended right at the closet door. Haley stepped out, trying to adjust her dress. She bent down to pick up her shoes, but was shaking so much she dropped one. I said, "Put your clothes on properly. I'm not going to hit you." She froze and looked up at me. She was probably expecting a screaming match, waiting to play the victim. I didn't give her that satisfaction. Vince was still on his knees, hugging my legs. Forgive me this once. We've been married almost 10 years. I was wrong, I'll fix it. I'll do whatever you want. I looked down at him. Fix it how? Wash the sheets and pretend nobody laid on them? He choked up. Haley had regained some composure. She put on her cardigan, fixed her hair, and gave a cold smirk. Lauren, you should honestly look at yourself. Vince has been suffocating with you for a long time. Everything in this house runs on your rules. From the dish towels to the bank accounts. No man can survive living like an employee under his wife. I turned to her, my voice eerily calm. Are you done talking? Haley pressed her lips together. I held my phone up, getting her face clearly in frame. You are standing in my bedroom, next to my husband, after using a passcode to enter my home. If you want to talk, speak clearly. Name, job title, company, state it all. Haley turned pale and looked away. Stop recording me. I'm leaving. You walked into the frame yourself. Vince jumped up, trying to snatch the phone. I stepped back and glared at him. Touch me again. I dare you. Maybe the look in my eyes made him freeze. He didn't step forward. The room was silent except for the AC. It felt as cold as if no marital warmth had ever existed there. I kept recording. The closet, the shoes, the sheets, the unplugged cables. Every image going into my phone felt like a knife carving into my memory. I told Vince slowly, from this second on, don't call me your wife to beg for mercy. Your wife died the moment I opened that closet. Haley bent down to pick up her other shoe. She tried to look calm, but her hands were shaking so badly her strap kept slipping. Vince stood by the bed, looking at me, then at the phone as if hoping my stopping the recording would magically erase his sins. I said, grab your things and get out of my house. Haley bit her lip and bent down to grab her cream bag near the closet. In her panic, the bag's strap caught on the drawer handle. She yanked it hard. The bag hit the floor, the clasp popped open, and its contents spilled everywhere. Lipstick, wallet, a small perfume bottle, a portable charger, and a thick brown manila folder that slid right to my feet. I don't know why, but among the absolute mess of that room, my eyes locked onto that folder. Written in pen on the label was, Lincoln Park Condo, signpost, trip. I bent down to pick it up. Haley lunged forward. Don't touch my stuff. I looked up, staring her down. Your stuff? It says my condo on it. She froze. Vince's face drained of color so fast I could see him turning ghost white. He stepped forward, his voice panicked. Lauren, give it to me. That has nothing to do with you. I took a step back and opened the folder. The first page was a photocopy of our property deed. The next page was a scan of my driver's license. Then, a sheet of paper with printed samples of my signature, with handwritten notes in blue ink pointing out the curves of the L and the slant of the letters. My heart felt like it was being crushed. I heard myself ask, my voice barely a whisper, what were you planning to do with these? Vince licked his lips, his eyes darting around. I was just prepping some options. Nothing happened. I flipped to a black USB drive taped to the inside cover. The white sticker on it read 100K HELOC. Next to it was a sticky note with the name Tyler Brooks, a phone number, and a note. Get Elle to sign post Miami, or forge before she's back. I laughed. A cold, dry sound that didn't belong to me. Turns out, my business trip wasn't just a convenient time for him to bring a woman home. I was leaving so he could forge my signature and take out a massive loan on my house. Vince held his hands up, pleading. Lauren, listen to me. I'm drowning. I was just trying to secure temporary funds. Once I pay off my debts, my business will turn a profit and I'll pay it back. I haven't signed anything in your name yet. Haven't had the time to, right? He went silent. I looked at the folder. This condo was bought with my parents' land money. With the nights I stayed up until 2 in the morning revising ad copy so I could make the mortgage. with the times I skipped buying new clothes to cover his end of the bills. Yet he put it on a table to be pawned off like a cheap watch. Suddenly, Vince's tone changed. He stopped begging. His face tightened, his voice harsh. The house is in both our names. I have the right to leverage it for business. Stop acting like you're the only one who poured money into it. I looked at him for a long time. Leveraging it for business? Or leveraging it to push your wife into debt? The room went dead silent. Haley, standing to the side, lost her terrified demeanor. She hugged her bag and gave a cynical laugh. Lauren, all men need opportunities. You hold the reins too tight, so Vince had to find another way. Successful women always think they're right about everything. I turned to her. You're young, but your fake wisdom is repulsive. You must practice a lot. Haley's face flushed red. Vince yelled, Lauren, don't insult her. I looked at him in disbelief. His wife was standing here holding the forged loan documents on her own home, and he was terrified his mistress's feelings were hurt. Life is sometimes so absurd you don't even need a script. I held up my phone, clearly recording every page in the folder. The deed, my ID, the signature practice sheet, the power of attorney form, the USB, the sticky note with Tyler Brooks's name. I panned to the unplugged camera, the disabled smoke detector, the wrinkled sheets. Vince stepped forward fast, trying to grab my phone. Enough. You've recorded enough. I backed up, my back hitting the vanity, but I held the phone tight. Try it. It's auto-syncing to the cloud. You break the phone, you just owe me a new one. Vince froze. It was the first time that day he looked at me and saw someone else. He was used to the Lauren who compromised, who thought of him, who hated domestic drama. He never expected that woman knew how to save herself when backed into a corner. I told Haley, get out of my house, and I'm keeping this folder because it contains my personal documents and assets. Haley tried to protest, but Vince grabbed her arm. Just go. She yanked her arm away. You're telling me to go? This is all your fault. You said she was in Miami for 2 days. You said the paperwork would be done before she got back. Now we're caught and you're dumping it all on me? I looked at Vince. He looked dead on his feet. Every word Haley said hammered another nail into the coffin of our marriage. So it was all timed. The flight, the empty house, the disabled cameras, the prep documents. If I hadn't checked the camera to look for Barnaby, I would have come home a few days later, rolled my suitcase inside, completely unaware that a massive debt pit had been dug right under my feet. Haley hurriedly gathered her things and walked to the door. Before stepping out, she glared at me, a mix of fear and sheer malice. I didn't see her out. A woman who enters my home with a passcode my husband gave her doesn't need me to hold the door when she leaves. The front door slammed shut. The condo suddenly felt terrifyingly quiet. The loud thud was like a gavel slamming down on my marriage. Vince stood in the living room, hair messy, shirt untucked. He looked at the folder in my hand, then at me. His eyes were red, but I couldn't tell if it was from shame, fear, or frustration that his scheme failed. Lauren, can we talk? I held Barnaby, who had crawled out from under the sofa, his fur puffed up, his yellow eyes watching me. I didn't answer. Vince took a step forward. I know I'm wrong, but you have to let me explain. I didn't mean to hurt you. I was just backed into a corner. I looked at him, my voice ice cold. A man backed into a corner tells his wife the truth. He doesn't bring his mistress home, unplug the cameras, and forge power of attorney documents. Vince froze. He rubbed his head. Stop calling her a mistress. It sounds so heavy. I let out a choke of a laugh. Then what should I call her? The coworker lying on our marital bed? He went silent. The living room that used to hold laughter and the smell of morning coffee now only smelled of cheap perfume creeping out from the bedroom. I put Barnaby down, grabbed the folder and the USB, and walked straight into the home office. Vince followed. Lauren, what are you doing? I didn't turn around to see how far he had gone to sell my life. I locked the office door. Outside, Vince knocked softly. Open the door, I'm begging you. We're married. Let's talk this out. I leaned against the door, the word married tasting like ash in my mouth. When he needed me to pay his debts, I was his wife. When he needed someone in his bed, I became a stranger. Men are truly more versatile at casting roles for their wives than Broadway directors. I booted up my old laptop, the one I kept for offline backups, completely disconnected from my main emails or bank accounts. My hands shook as I plugged in the USB. Folders popped up. Loan options, condo docs, signatures, POA. I opened the first folder. A PDF loaded. A $100,000 home equity line of credit application. The collateral was listed as the Lincoln Park condo, owned by Vincent Miller and Lauren Davis. The loan purpose. Business capital and personal debt consolidation. I read that line over and over. Personal debt consolidation. His 35 grand in crypto and bar debts was packaged into a phrase that looked as clean as a freshly wiped counter. Life is truly talented at putting a white shirt on absolute filth. I opened the signature folder. There were high-res photos of my signature cropped from our original closing docs, car loan papers, and even an old furniture delivery receipt. Next to each photo were digital notes analyzing the pen pressure and curves. My scalp went numb. The affair hurt. But this made me terrified. A cold, calculating terror. Not because I lost my husband, but because I almost lost the legal right to my own life via a forged signature. Outside, Vince was still standing at the door. "Lauren, please listen. I haven't signed anything. I didn't do it." I stared at the screen and yelled back. "You didn't do it because I came home early." He paused, then his voice grew agitated. "You're just overreacting. I would have paid it off. The house is still ours. It's not going anywhere. Stop acting like I sold it." I opened the POA folder. A pre-filled power of attorney form. It stated I granted Vincent Miller full rights to negotiate with private lenders and notaries regarding our joint property. The signature line was blank, but my printed name was ready beneath it. Reading that, tears finally hit the keyboard. Not out of weakness, but absolute resentment. I remembered our first night in this condo. Vince hugged me in the empty living room and said I never had to worry about bouncing around apartments again. Yet that same man was ready to turn this home into a noose around my neck. I opened the last folder. Blurred photos of a notary stamp. A text file named Tyler Brooks Notes detailing requirements. Original IDs, marriage cert, direct signatures, or POA, notary appointment. Note: execute while Lauren is in Miami to avoid complications. My heart dropped. Execute while Lauren is in Miami. Vince's voice softened outside. "Lauren, I was terrified you'd lose respect for me. I owe $35,000. I didn't know where to turn. Haley just introduced me to a guy who could help. I was stupid, I was wrong, but I wanted to save our house." I wiped my tears. Save our house by mortgaging it behind my back? What were you going to tell me afterward? He didn't answer. I opened my banking app on my phone and checked our joint account. Unfamiliar transactions glared at me. A designer bag, $1,200. Sephora, $400. A boutique hotel downtown, $600. The sheet set, $250. Taxis, dinners, totaling over $12,500. Looking at that number, a dull ache spread through my chest. Not because of the money. I had given his sister hundreds without blinking. I had paid for his mother's meds without writing it down. But every cent drained from our joint account to buy gifts for the woman in my bedroom wasn't money anymore. It was a slap in the face. Vince spoke again, losing patience. "You're making a mountain out of a molehill. Women always want to blow things out of proportion." I closed my eyes. That sentence severed the absolute last thread of pity I had for him. My mom used to say once trust is broken, it's shattered forever. I used to think it was a cliché. Sitting in front of a screen filled with my own forged life, I realized the old folks didn't just talk to hear their own voices. Broken trust, no matter how you glue it back together, never holds water again. Near dawn, I shut down the laptop. I copied the USB and my backup drive, took photos of every file with my phone, and put the USB in a Ziploc bag. The living room was quiet. Vince was probably exhausted or busy brainstorming a new lie. I opened the filing cabinet. For the first time in nearly a decade of living together, I separated the condo deed, my mortgage documents, my personal savings info, my passport, my social security card, and important statements. I shoved them into a canvas tote. The sky outside was still dark. The city hadn't woken up, but inside me, a completely different woman opened her eyes. The next morning, I didn't wake Vince. He was asleep on the sofa, one arm over his forehead, phone face down on his chest. Seeing him look so exhausted for a split second, I felt a pang of sorrow. 10 years of marriage doesn't just evaporate overnight. But then my eyes caught the bedroom door, still slightly open. The bronze gold sheets lay there wrinkled, a stain that hadn't been washed out. My heart went cold again. I walked quietly back into the office. The canvas bag was full, but I double-checked everything. Deed, closing docs, mortgage paperwork, passports, insurance papers, the external hard drive, the USB, and all file copies. I grabbed a few old notebooks where I tracked my monthly mortgage transfers. I used to track them just for budgeting. I never thought those scribbles would become evidence. Life is a better accountant than any CPA. I opened my banking app. First, I locked the secondary credit card Vince was using. I changed the passwords to my primary accounts, updated my recovery emails, and activated two-factor authentication everywhere. Next, I changed the security camera app passwords, revoked his secondary access to the smart home system, and deleted the temporary door code he had created. When I hit confirm for the final time, my hands shook. Not from regret, but from the realization that from this moment forward, I was officially stepping out of the role of the blindly trusting wife. Barnaby stood at the door, looking at me with round yellow eyes. I crouched down and scratched his head. I told him to be a good boy and that I would be back for him. He pushed his head into my hand and let out a soft meow. That sound made my eyes burn. This condo used to be my home. Yet this morning, I had to leave it like I was fleeing a hurricane. I grabbed a piece of blank paper and wrote one line, leaving it on the dining table. From now on, all communication is in writing. No accusations, no cursing, no venting. I was afraid if I wrote more, I'd soften or get angry. Both were dangerous right now. As I pulled my suitcase to the door, Vince woke up. He sat up abruptly, hair messy, eyes red. "Where are you going?" I didn't turn around. "Somewhere safe." He ran over and blocked the door. "Lauren, don't do this. We can talk." I looked at him. He had talked too much already. From today, the documents would do the talking. He looked at the canvas bag in my hand, his face changing. "Where are you taking the house files?" "Holding on to what belongs to me." "My name is on that house too." I nodded. "Then you better be very careful with what you've done." He reached out to grab my suitcase. I stared a hole through his hand. "Touch me or my things and I'm calling security." Vince froze. Maybe for the first time, he realized I wasn't the woman who would lower her voice just so the neighbors wouldn't hear. I opened the door and dragged my bag into the hall. The door clicked shut behind me. It was a soft sound, but it felt like cutting a very long rope. Down in the garage, I saw Bob. He looked at my bag and suitcase, hesitating. "Leaving early, Lauren?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, staying with a friend for a bit, Bob. If anyone asks, tell them I left on my own accord. Nobody forced me." Bob looked at me for a long time, then nodded. "Call me if you need anything. I've worked in this building long enough to know who the good ones are." That simple statement warmed me more than I expected. I took an Uber to Allie Carter's place. When she opened the door, she took one look at my face and pulled me inside. She didn't ask if I was sure, didn't tell me to think it over, didn't sigh like an outsider offering useless advice. She just said, "Give me the files, wash your face. If you collapse now, they win." I burst into tears right in her living room. I cried like someone who had been choking all night and finally took a breath. Allie let me cry, then pushed a box of tissues in front of me. "Cry all you want, but when you're done, wake up. You didn't just get cheated on. You almost got branded with a massive debt." I handed her the folder and the USB. Allie read through the pages, her face darkening. My God, they weren't just sneaking around. They were paving the road to steal your assets. I sat there holding a glass of water, my body freezing, my throat bitter. Allie booted up her computer and created a secure folder. She backed up the doorbell footage, the bedroom video, the photos of the unplugged cameras and disabled sensors. She copied the USB files and the joint account statements. She saved them to my drive, her drive, and uploaded them to a secure cloud account. I asked, "Should I post this online? Expose him?" Allie looked at me like I was about to jump off a bridge. "No, I get that you're furious, but if you post it, they'll twist it into a defamation suit. If you want to win, don't fight a 5-minute anger battle that costs you 5 years." I stayed quiet. It hurt, but she was right. My phone started vibrating nonstop. Vince calling, then Barbara calling, then a text from Natalie. "What are you doing?" Vince is freaking out and the whole family is in an uproar. I muted notifications and placed the phone face down. Allie nodded. "Good. No arguing today. They have louder mouths, but they don't have cleaner hands." I sat in silence for a long time. In my head flashed the image of Vince from our broke years, sitting on our cheap apartment floor, carefully splitting the last piece of burger with me. That man used to be real. Because he was real, the pain now cut so deep. I whispered, "I miss the old him, Allie." Allie sighed, her voice softening. "Miss him if you have to. But don't let missing the ghost of who he was allow the man he is today to destroy you." She handed me a mug of hot tea. "Drink. This afternoon, I'm taking you to see Marcus, a real divorce and asset attorney. This isn't a problem we solve with tears." I held the mug with both hands, the warmth slowly seeping into my palms. Outside Allie's window, the sun was high. The city was loud, oblivious to the fact that someone had just lost their home from the inside out. But at least, for the first time since that long night, I wasn't sitting alone in a room full of lies. That afternoon, Allie drove me to a law firm tucked away on a quiet street in the West Loop. The sign wasn't huge, The waiting room wasn't flashy or intimidating, but everything was immaculate and organized. I liked that. After a night where my home turned into a theater of deceit, I desperately needed a place where things were exactly where they belonged. Attorney Marcus Quinn walked out to greet us. He was in his 40s, tall, wearing thin-rimmed glasses with a slow, steady voice. "Miss Davis, have a seat. You don't need to navigate the emotions right now. Just walk me through the timeline." That sentence calmed me down. Allie placed the folder on the desk. "Marcus, my friend was cheated on, which is bad enough. But this folder has deed copies, signature practice sheets, and power of attorney drafts. I don't think this is simple." Marcus didn't rush to conclusions. He put on thin gloves and pulled everything out. The deed photocopy, my ID, the unsigned POA, the USB, the photos of the disabled sensors, the doorbell video, the bedroom video. Watching him review the evidence made my chest tight. Every item on that desk was a thorn. The clearer it was laid out, the more I realized my marriage hadn't collapsed in a minute. It had been rotting from the inside. I just refused to look. Marcus asked, "What time did the living room camera go offline?" I noticed it when I was at O'Hare. The app showed it online, but the screen was black. The smoke detector was manually disabled after that. The door code notifications? My husband. We had a guest code for a cleaner, but she quit, and I deleted it after the holidays. He took notes, then asked, "The woman in the video entered smoothly?" I swallowed hard, like she lived there. Allie sat next to me, resting a hand on my shoulder. That touch kept me from collapsing. Marcus opened the USB files on a standalone laptop. He read for a long time, occasionally stopping to jot something down. When he saw the signature practice folder, his face hardened. "Miss Davis, I'll be blunt. This isn't just a standard infidelity case anymore." I looked at him. What could they have done to me? Currently, based on what you've provided, the loan file was incomplete and there's no sign of disbursement. That's your saving grace. But gathering your personal ID, practicing your signature, and drafting a POA for a jointly owned asset is incredibly dangerous. My throat felt like sandpaper. What if I actually got on that flight to Miami? Marcus looked at me. He wasn't trying to scare me, but he wasn't sugarcoating it either. They might have tried to pressure you into signing when you got back. Or they could have used these documents to secure a hard money loan from a private lender to force your hand later. We don't have enough to prove criminal forgery yet, since the act wasn't completed, but we have enough to lock down your assets immediately. I nodded. The words lockdown felt like stakes being driven into the ground against a flood. Marcus pulled out a form. Step 1. You send a formal notice to the bank holding your current mortgage. The notice states you refuse any secondary loans, HELOCs, refinancing, or changes to the deed without your physical, in-person presence and verification. No phone verifications, no representatives, no POAs. Allie chimed in. Will the bank actually honor that? Yes. It's a fraud alert protocol. We can't accuse anyone criminally without grounds, but we can lock the front door. You don't wait for a fire to buy an extinguisher. Unfortunately, a lot of people like to save money right when it's most dangerous. For the first time all day, I let out a weak laugh. Not out of joy, but because the bitter analogy fit so perfectly. Marcus continued. Step 2. Gather proof of the down payment. The wire transfers from your parents, any emails, any written agreements from them if you have them. Step 3. Do not meet your husband alone. Do not sign anything, not even a marital reconciliation agreement. I asked, what if my mother-in-law calls or shows up causing a scene? Marcus put his pen down. You can be polite, but do not sacrifice your financial survival on the altar of family obedience. Adults can offer advice, but no one has the right to force you to sign away your safety. That made me think of Barbara. She had called several times since morning. I hadn't answered. As if on cue. My phone lit up on the desk. Mother-in-law. Allie looked at me. Speakerphone, record it. I started a voice memo and answered. Hello, Barbara. Barbara's voice barked through the speaker, skipping any pleasantries. Lauren, what are you doing? When a couple has issues, they keep it behind closed doors. Why did you freeze Vince's cards and run off with the house papers? Do you want to humiliate my son in front of everyone? You women make a few bucks today and think you run the world. I closed my eyes for a second, then replied calmly. I didn't want to make this a big deal, Barbara, but I have to secure the documents regarding my assets and my identity. She scoffed. Secure what? The house is in both names. He's your husband. He needed to leverage it for his business, and you should be supporting him. Women who hoard the money and the papers drive their husbands away. I looked at Marcus. He gestured for me to stay calm. I said, So you knew Vince was planning to use the condo documents to take out a loan, Barbara? The line went dead quiet for a split second. Very brief, but enough. She spoke faster. He was just trying to secure some temporary capital. The house is marital property. Why are you overreacting over your husband using it a little? A smart wife knows how to lift her husband up when he's struggling. I felt my heart drop into my stomach. So she knew. She might not have known about Haley hiding in the closet, or the USB, or my forged signatures, but she knew her son was trying to mortgage the condo. And instead of asking if I agreed, she assumed my consent was irrelevant. I spoke slowly. Barbara, I have always respected you. But from today forward, anything involving assets, documents, or sketchy loans will be handled through my lawyer. She raised her voice. Are you threatening me? I am his mother. I have a say. You can have a say, but I won't sign anything, hand over any documents, or accept any debt that I didn't personally agree to. She paused, then her voice went ice cold. You make some money so you look down on your husband and his family. You'll see. A divorced woman doesn't have a happy ending, I answered softly. I'm not leaving my marriage for a happy ending. I'm leaving so I can survive. I hung up. The room was quiet. Allie let out a long breath. Did you hear that? The truth is out. Marcus saved the recording to the evidence file. Miss Davis, from now on, no more arguing on the phone. If anyone calls, you say one thing. All communications must be in writing or through my attorney. I nodded, my hands still shaking, but my resolve hardening. This morning, I left my house out of fear. This afternoon, after that call, I realized I wasn't just leaving a cheating husband. I was stepping out of an entire toxic system. A system that called my sacrifice an obligation, my assets communal, and my silence knowing my place. I took the pen Marcus offered and signed the fraud alert for the bank. This time, my signature wasn't being forged on a shady loan. It was on the first boundary I was building to protect my own life. The next morning, I had barely dozed for 2 hours when Allie's phone rang constantly. She was brewing coffee in the kitchen, looked at her screen, and frowned. Lauren, it's the lobby concierge. I sat up, my head pounding. I had barely slept, playing the recording of my mother-in-law over and over, asking myself how many years I had lived under the guise of keeping the peace. Allie answered, her face darkening. I'll be right down. She hung up and turned to me. Your mother-in-law and sister-in-law are in the lobby. The concierge says they're demanding to come up, telling people I'm harboring a runaway wife. I closed my eyes. The exhaustion was suddenly replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. I'll go down. Allie blocked me. Are you sure? I can handle them. I shook my head. No, this is my fight. But come with me. Allie set her coffee down. Obviously, I'm not letting them put on a one-woman show in my building. I washed my face, threw on a simple blouse, and went down with Allie. In the elevator, I looked at my reflection in the stainless steel walls. Puffy eyes, pale lips, but my posture was straight. I told myself I wasn't going down there to win an argument. I was going down to make it crystal clear that no one could use family to force me into financial ruin. As soon as the elevator doors opened, I heard Barbara's voice echoing in the upscale lobby. Call her down here. What kind of wife abandons her home, locks her husband's cards, and steals the house deed? Women these days make a few bucks and think they run the show. Beside her was Natalie. Natalie was in her work clothes, holding her phone up, looking furious, like she was ready to go live on social media. A few residents walking by slowed down. The concierge looked visibly uncomfortable. I walked over, keeping my tone polite. Hello, Barbara. Natalie, what's going on? Barbara whipped around. Pointing a finger at me, she barked, You still know how to call me by my name? I thought you got a lawyer and treated us like trash. I took a breath. I got a lawyer because this involves my assets and unauthorized loan documents. But I haven't lost my manners, Natalie scoffed. You talk a good game. You left Vince alone, froze his cards, and sent him into a depression, and now you claim to have manners? What kind of wife are you? I looked at Natalie. I was the kind of wife who paid the mortgage, cooked the meals, helped pay for your mother's prescriptions, and bailed you out when you needed cash. You might have forgotten all that, but I remember. Natalie's face flushed. Don't throw money in my face. Then don't throw the word wife in mine. Barbara was shaking with rage. How dare you speak to your sister-in-law like that? When a family has issues, you keep it in the family. You bring friends and lawyers into this? Are you trying to humiliate my son in front of the whole world? I looked around. A few neighbors had stopped, pretending to look at their phones, but their ears were fully tuned in. I knew the pressure of public opinion. People don't care who's right or wrong. They just see a woman leaving her husband and assume she's the difficult one. I spoke slowly. Barbara, if you want to talk privately, we can go upstairs and sit down properly. But if you want to air this out here for everyone to hear, I will be clear. I left because Vince brought another woman into our marital bed, disabled the security cameras, and prepared documents to take out a massive loan on my condo without my consent. The lobby went dead silent. Barbara turned pale, instantly yelling, "Stop slandering him!" Men make mistakes. A smart woman knows how to bring her husband back. Throwing a fit like this is just dragging him through the mud. I looked at her. My heart hurt, but I wasn't trembling like yesterday. "Barbara, I didn't drag Vince through the mud. I just refused to lay down so he could walk over me." Natalie held up her phone. "Say that again. I'm recording this. I'm posting this so everyone sees how you treat your mother-in-law." Allie stepped forward, her voice calm but razor-sharp. "Natalie, you're recording inside my private residential building, capturing residents without consent. You edit and post that, and you'll be dealing with the property management and my lawyers. If you're going to record the whole truth. Don't play amateur director, you're bad at it." Natalie hesitated, lowering her phone slightly. I looked at my sister-in-law, enunciating every word. "If you want to protect Vince, tell him to talk to my lawyer. But if you keep recording, making up lies, or claiming I stole the house, I will hand every piece of evidence over to the authorities." Barbara clutched her chest, her voice choked with fake outrage. "You're good. You're real good. I raised my son all these years, just for him to marry a woman who pushes him to the brink. I maintained my composure. You raised Vince, and I respect that. But you cannot use that as an excuse to make your daughter-in-law carry his debts and his betrayals. I will be polite, but my deed, my bank accounts, and my signature aren't going to anyone." Barbara gritted her teeth. "You care more about your house than your husband." I looked her dead in the eye. "I care about surviving." An older resident standing nearby let out a soft sigh. I don't know whose side he was on, but his eyes weren't judgmental anymore. Anyone who has lived long enough knows that when a woman says a sentence like that, she's been pushed to the absolute edge. Realizing she couldn't bully me, Barbara changed tactics. "Give Vince the keys and the documents. He needs to sort out his business. You're still married. You don't get to hoard everything." "I'm not hoarding everything," I replied. "I'm securing documents containing my personal information and my equity. If Vince needs copies for legal business, he can request them through my attorney. I'm not handing them over just so another forged power of attorney miraculously appears tomorrow." Barbara froze. I hit the exact nerve she was trying to hide. Natalie pulled her mother's arm. "Let's go, Mom. Talking to her is a waste of time." But Barbara had to get the last word. "You'll have to bring those papers crawling back to him eventually. Don't think having a lawyer means you won." I didn't answer. Threats like that only expose the desperation of the person making them. Allie turned to the concierge. "Please note that these two individuals are not allowed up to my unit without my explicit permission. I do not accept guests who cause disturbances." The concierge nodded quickly. "Understood, ma'am. I'll notify management." As Barbara and Natalie walked out the revolving doors, I realized my palms were slick with sweat. Allie pulled me into the elevator, silent until the doors closed. Once inside my apartment, I collapsed into a chair, feeling like I had just walked through a hailstorm. Allie handed me a glass of water. "You did great." I shook my head, my eyes burning. I still called her Barbara. Allie sat next to me. "Being polite doesn't mean letting people step on your neck. You handled it with class, but you didn't yield an inch." I let out a weak laugh, and then I cried. But this time, the tears didn't make me feel weak. They felt like the sting of antiseptic on a wound that was finally starting to heal. That afternoon, I texted Marcus about the confrontation. He replied concisely, "Document the time, witnesses, and summary. Do not meet them alone again." I wrote it all down. With every line, I understood one thing clearly. Kindness isn't standing still while someone pushes you off a cliff. Sometimes, kindness means saying enough and stepping back to save your own life. 3 days after the lobby incident, I was learning to live in a state of hypervigilance. A vibrating phone made my heart jump. A text made my hands go cold. People say time heals all wounds, but for me, every day felt like opening a new drawer and not knowing what nightmare was inside. That morning, I was sitting with Allie reviewing the evidence files when an unknown number called. I stared at the screen for a long time before answering. "Hello, this is Lauren." A polite, professional woman's voice came through. "Hi, Lauren. This is Chloe from the Chase branch managing the mortgage for the Lincoln Park property under you and Vincent Miller. Are you available to stop by the branch today? We need to verify some information regarding the asset." I gripped the phone tight. "What kind of information?" Chloe hesitated, expertly trained not to overstep but clearly concerned. "There's been an inquiry from a third party regarding a secondary loan on the property. We haven't processed anything, but since you filed a fraud alert with us recently, I wanted to invite you in to verify and update your file." I looked at Allie. She grabbed a sticky note and wrote, "Call Marcus. I can be there in an hour," I said. "I'll be bringing my attorney." "Understood," Chloe said quickly. "Please bring your original ID and any relevant documents." I hung up, a chill spreading through my body. It wasn't just suspicion in a bedroom anymore. It wasn't just a USB drive. Someone had actively taken my property info and knocked on the bank's door. I called Marcus. He listened and said, "Do not sign anything except a receipt of information. I will meet you at the branch." An hour later, we were sitting in a small glass office at Chase. Chloe was in her 30s, sharp and professional. "I want to assure you first," Chloe began. "We have not approved, processed, or dispersed any secondary funds on this property, but someone did use the property info, Mr. Miller's name, and your name to inquire about HELOC procedures. They left incomplete photocopies and promised to return with the rest." "Was it my husband?" I asked. Chloe shook her head. "No. The point of contact was a man named Tyler Brooks. He introduced himself as a financial consultant prepping capital options for Mr. Miller. Because you're a co-owner, we needed to verify." Hearing that name made all the puzzle pieces lock together. Tyler Brooks, the name on the sticky note in Haley's bag, the name on the USB. Now he was at my bank, flesh and blood, executing a scheme that was coming to light. Marcus cut straight to the point. "Can the bank formally log Miss Davis's requirement that absolutely no transactions, secondary loans, or title changes occur without her physical in-person presence and verified ID?" "Yes," Chloe nodded. "I will hard-code a high-risk alert on the file. Any requests for HELOCs, refinancing, or POA executions must require Miss Davis to be physically present at a branch." I pulled my actual driver's license out and placed it on the desk. My hands were still shaking, but my voice was firm. "Please note this. I do not authorize anyone, including my husband, to process any loans or encumber this property without my direct in-person consent." Chloe looked at me with a flash of sympathy, but kept it professional. "Understood. I've updated the system." She showed us a preliminary inquiry form, not an official application, but on it was Tyler's phone number and a note. "Client needs expedited processing. Female co-owner currently out of town." I read that note, my stomach twisting into knots. Marcus photographed the permitted sections and asked for a formal record of our meeting. Everything was procedural, quiet, no dramatic table slapping. But the calmness was terrifying. It showed that dragging someone into massive debt didn't require a gun. It just required a few photocopies, smooth talking, and a forged signature. Leaving the bank, Allie pulled me into a nearby Starbucks. Before I could even take a sip of coffee, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You hold on too tight, that's why men have to look for other ways. Vince isn't entirely to blame. You should look in the mirror, I didn't even need to guess." The self-righteous, victim-blaming tone had Haley Smith written all over it. I didn't reply, I just screenshotted it and sent it to Marcus. Allie glanced at it and let out a cold laugh. "This girl really is a prodigy. She's practically building our harassment evidence file for us." I couldn't laugh. I was just exhausted. But unlike a few days ago, this exhaustion didn't make me want to collapse. It made me want to plant my feet firmly on the ground. Marcus called me later. I ran a background check. Tyler Brooks has been flagged in a few consumer complaints regarding shady private lending and predatory loan brokering. Nothing criminal on record yet, but you must avoid any direct contact with him. "What do I do now?" I asked. "We don't pull the string too early. We see the trap now. Let them tighten the noose on themselves. Keep saving every text, call, and document. If they escalate, we go to the police." I watched the traffic out the window. The city was still bustling, still fine. People were rushing to get coffee, waiting at red lights, carrying groceries. The world outside was brutally normal, while I had just confirmed my own husband tried to appraise my future like a pawnshop item. That night I opened the files again. Vince, Haley, Tyler. They were separate pieces, but connected they formed a straight line. A prideful man drowning in debt, a mistress pouring gas on the fire, a broker turning a family home into bait. I used to think cheating was someone stepping out of a marriage. No, there's a worse kind. The kind where they stay in the house, call you their wife, and quietly invite strangers in to measure you for a coffin. I drove up to Wisconsin on a gloomy afternoon. The car passed familiar county roads, flanked by harvested cornfields, the stalks golden against the damp earth. The closer I got to my parents' farm, the heavier my heart felt. People say when kids grow up, they hide their pain from their parents not out of distrust, but because they don't want to see old eyes turn red. I brought a bag of files, a few changes of clothes, and a head full of questions without decent answers. Allie had offered to come, but I told her I needed to do this alone. I had to tell my parents myself. Allie nodded, just advising me not to hide the ugly parts. She said my parents were stronger than I thought. I walked into the yard and saw my mom picking tomatoes near the back porch. When she looked up and saw me, she froze. "Loren, why didn't you tell us you were coming?" I forced a smile. "Had some free time, wanted to visit." She looked at my face. It took her 1 second to know something was wrong, but she didn't pry. She wiped her hands on her apron and pulled me inside. "Go wash up. Your dad is in the shed, I'll go get him." My childhood home hadn't changed. The old oak dining table, the ticking grandfather clock, the smell of wood smoke, roasted chicken, and fresh pine. It all made my throat constrict. In Chicago, I had eaten at fancy restaurants with beautiful lighting and plush booths, talking about campaigns and contracts. But nothing made me feel as protected as this old, creaky house. My dad, David, walked in from the shed. His shoulders were a bit more stooped than the last time I saw him. Seeing me, he didn't ask much. "You're home. Let's eat first. We'll talk after." Dinner was pot roast, mashed potatoes, and green beans. Simple country food, yet looking at the plates, I almost broke down. Mom put a slice of roast on my plate. "Eat up, sweetie. You look so pale." I held my fork, my hands trembling slightly. Dad noticed, but stayed silent. He was always like that, so quiet that some thought he was stern. But everyone in this family knew the quieter he was, the closer he was listening. After a few bites, I put my fork down. "Mom, Dad, Vince and I are having major problems." Mom's hand froze. Dad kept looking at me, his eyes deepening. I told them everything. I spared the graphic details of the bedroom, but I gave them enough. Vince bringing another woman into the condo, disabling the cameras, and the folder with the forged signatures aiming for a $100,000 loan. Mom covered her mouth, tears immediately spilling over. "Oh my God, how could he do this to you?" I looked down. "I don't know, Mom." She stood up to grab a napkin, but after 2 steps, she turned back and wrapped her arms around my shoulders. She sobbed out loud, but she didn't say a single word about trying to work it out or that divorce is hard on a woman. She just choked out, "I'm crying because you were deceived. I will never force you to stay with a man who wants to destroy you." Hearing that, the dam broke. After days of my mother-in-law calling me unreasonable, my sister-in-law accusing me of abandoning my husband, I finally had someone validate my pain. Dad stood up and went to his bedroom. A minute later, he came out with an old, faded green lockbox. He set it on the table and slowly opened it. I knew there'd be a day we might need this. I looked up. "What did you keep, Dad?" He pulled out papers. The bill of sale for the back lot from years ago. The bank wire receipt for the $60,000 sent directly to my account. And a handwritten letter, in his unmistakable scrawl. "We are gifting this money exclusively to our daughter, Lauren Davis, for the purchase of her home. It is not a joint gift to her husband or his family." I was stunned. "Dad, you kept this so carefully?" He looked at me, his eyes red, but his voice rock solid. "I'm a countryman, but I'm not a fool. Blood, sweat, and tears go into money, so you need a paper trail. Loving your kid means making sure she always has an exit door." I picked up the handwritten note, tears dropping onto the oak table. "Back then I laughed and thought you were just being paranoid. You were young. It's good to trust people. But trusting someone doesn't mean handing them the keys to your entire life and walking away blind." Mom sat next to me, holding my hand. "Lauren, you can rebuild a house, but if you lose your self-respect, how do I fix that for you?" That sentence hit me hard. I remembered all the years I tried to be the perfect daughter-in-law, biting my tongue so nobody could say my parents raised me poorly. I swallowed the passive-aggressive comments, the financial burdens, just to keep up appearances, and that fear of what people might say almost got me buried in debt. I cried. "I'm so sorry. You sold your land for me, and I put his name on the deed. I thought a married couple shouldn't keep score." Dad sighed. But he didn't scold me. Not keeping score is fine for a marriage. But when one person is doing math behind the other's back, it's not a marriage anymore. You made a mistake by trusting too much, but the fault belongs to the man who sold your trust. Mom nodded. "Don't put this all on yourself. When someone has an ugly heart, they'll find a way through the smallest crack." I pulled out my folder and showed Dad. He read every page slowly. When he saw the signature practice sheet, his jaw clenched. He didn't swear, but his face hardened. "He's gone this far, Lauren. You cannot go soft on him. A husband who loves his wife doesn't practice forging her name for a loan." I lowered my head, my voice hoarse. "I'm terrified, Dad." Dad put his warm, calloused hand on my shoulder. "If you're terrified, you stay alert. Your mother and I are right here. The door to this house is always open for you. But remember, you come home to get back on your feet, not to hide for the rest of your life. That afternoon, Mom packed me a cooler of roast, fresh veggies from the garden, and apples. Dad carefully put all the financial documents into a brand new plastic sleeve. He told me to give these to my lawyer tomorrow, copy whatever needs copying, but not to let the originals out of my sight. I hugged the folder to my chest. It wasn't just evidence. It was my dad's sweat, my mom's tears. It was the backbone I thought I had outgrown. As I drove out of the gravel driveway, I looked in the rearview mirror. My parents were standing on the porch. Mom was wiping her eyes, standing straight, hands clasped. The Wisconsin sky was starting to drizzle. I told myself, the road ahead was going to be excruciating, but at least I wasn't walking it empty-handed anymore. The next morning, I took the folder my dad gave me straight to Marcus Quinn's office. On the drive from Allie's place to the West Loop, I hugged the plastic sleeve to my chest like a child. Inside wasn't just the land sale receipt, the wire transfers, and the handwritten letter. It was the ultimate support system I thought I had lost. Marcus reviewed every page meticulously. He didn't say much, just nodded and jotted notes on his legal pad. "These documents are crucial," he said finally. "They prove the initial down payment originated from a specific non-marital gift intended solely for you. Coupled with your bank statements showing you paid the lion's share of the mortgage from your income, your legal standing is extremely strong." "Strong meaning I can keep the condo?" I asked. Marcus set his pen down and looked at me directly. "I can't guarantee anything 100% like a car salesman, but your evidence is excellent. We aim for a settlement first. If that fails, we prepare for litigation. The most important thing is that you do not sign anything under pressure, nor yield out of a momentary lapse of sentiment." I nodded. The mere mention of my signature sent a chill down my spine now. That afternoon, Vince arrived at the law office for a scheduled meeting. He wore a gray dress shirt, looking noticeably thinner. He had a stubble, and his eyes were sunken. In the past, seeing him look so run down would have sent me into a panic, asking if he was eating or sleeping. But today, I just looked at him and reminded myself that a pathetic-looking person isn't necessarily an innocent one. Vince sat down and looked right at me. "Lauren, how are you?" I didn't answer. Marcus spoke for me. "Today we are discussing 3 matters: the dissolution of the marriage, the division of marital assets, and the unauthorized loan documents related to the Lincoln Park property. Please remain calm, Mr. Miller." Vince nodded, but his eyes stayed glued to me. "Lauren, I know you're furious. I won't deny I screwed up. I wronged you, I wronged your parents, but we've been together almost 10 years. Are you really going to erase all of it?" I looked at his hands resting on the mahogany table. There was still a faint tan line on his ring finger where his wedding band used to be, though he had taken it off at some point. He choked up. "I was drowning in debt. I was scared. I was stupid and listened to the wrong people. And about Haley. I swear I don't love her. It was a lapse in judgment. Give me a chance to fix this. If it weren't for that folder, if it weren't for the USB, if I had only caught him cheating." Maybe those words would have hurt enough to make me hesitate. But when a person betrays your heart while simultaneously using your signature to plot against you, their apologies sound like a mosquito buzzing near spoiled food. I said, "Vince, I'm here to resolve this, not to listen to your sob story." He flinched. The way I addressed him made him realize I had fully stepped out of the role of his wife. Marcus slid a draft settlement agreement across the table. "Miss Davis's position is a divorce. Regarding the condo, she demands to retain full ownership and assume the remaining mortgage. Your actual financial contributions will be calculated via bank statements, and a reasonable buyout lump sum will be negotiated to settle the equity dispute." Vince picked up the paper, his face changing after just a few lines. "Hold on. The condo is in both our names. Why does she get to keep it?" His voice had lost its softness. Marcus replied smoothly, "Because the initial down payment was exclusively gifted to Miss Liz Davis by her parents, backed by documentary evidence. The monthly payments were predominantly made from her salary. Furthermore, you have engaged in the dissipation of marital assets for non-marital purposes and attempted to encumber a joint asset without the co-owner's consent." Vince slammed the paper onto the desk. "Let's get this straight. My name is on the deed. I didn't steal from anyone. If she wants a divorce, fine, but we split the house 50-50. I looked at him. Just minutes ago, he was pleading about our 10 years of love. The second the condo was threatened, all that affection evaporated faster than Wi-Fi in a thunderstorm. I pulled my parents' documents out and laid them on the table. This is the bill of sale for my dad's land. The wire transfer of $60,000 into my account. The handwritten note stating the money was explicitly for me to buy a home. These are the statements showing I paid the bank every month. And this is the $12,500 you drained from our joint account to buy designer bags, perfume, hotels, and Egyptian cotton sheets for Haley. Vince gritted his teeth. You're really calculating, aren't you? 10 years together and now you're counting every penny. I replied. I didn't count pennies before because I saw you as my husband. I'm counting them now because you saw me as a forgeable signature. Marcus opened a printed file from the USB and pushed it toward Vince. Mr. Miller, perhaps you can explain why there is a folder containing cropped, high-resolution samples of Miss Davis's signature taken from old contracts? Vince stared at the paper, his lips pressed tight. I don't know. Maybe Tyler did it. Then why was this USB found inside a folder in Miss Smith's handbag, inside your bedroom? Vince was silent. Marcus pressed on. Why was there a power of attorney drafted with Miss Daughter? Davis's name already typed in. When she has explicitly stated she never consented to any loan? Vince suddenly slammed his hand on the desk. I told you I was just prepping options. Stop trying to paint me as a criminal. I am her husband. I have the right to manage our assets. I noticed the paralegals outside looking through the glass. Marcus remained entirely composed. Mr. Miller, please keep your voice down. This meeting is being recorded. If you cannot maintain a professional demeanor, we will conclude here. Vince turned to me, his eyes bloodshot. You want to leave me with nothing, don't you? You listen to your friends, you listen to your lawyer, and now you're biting your own husband. You think a few pieces of paper mean you win? I looked at him. This time, I didn't get angry. I just saw the naked truth laid bare on that conference table. He mourned the loss of half the condo much more than he mourned the loss of his wife. I spoke very slowly. I used to love the man who split his last cheap burger with me in a crappy apartment, but the man sitting across from me today is only grieving for real estate. Vince shot up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. Fine. You think you're so smart? Go ahead, push it. But don't think I don't have ways to deal with this. He stormed out, slamming the heavy glass door behind him. I sat perfectly still, my hands resting on my parents' folder. No one spoke for a moment. Finally, Marcus said, Miss Davis, from today on, absolutely zero isolated contact with him. Do not take that last threat lightly. I nodded. My heart wasn't shattering like it did when I opened the closet. It was cold, but it was the kind of cold that kept me wide awake. I walked out of the law firm just as the sun dipped below the skyline. On the street, cars were gridlocked, stoplights glowing red, a guy selling newspapers shouting over the noise. The world doesn't stop because a marriage crumbles. It just stands there, coldly reminding you that if you want to keep living, you have to walk on your own 2 feet. I clutched the folder in my hand. Vince's mask had completely slipped, and strangely, seeing his true face made the pain recede just a little. After that meeting, everything started crashing down on Vincent Miller faster than he anticipated. The commercial furniture company he worked for launched an internal HR investigation. It started as an inquiry into an inappropriate relationship with an intern, but the deeper they dug, the messier it got. Haley wasn't just sleeping with Vince. She was texting other married executives at client firms, leaking contract bids, pricing, and commission kickbacks. The needle finally poked through the bag, and it was a whole bundle of rusty needles. Vince was suspended pending termination. Haley was fired that same week. Meanwhile, the name Tyler Brooks started surfacing in multiple fraud complaints regarding predatory lending, murky broker fees, and fraudulent family property applications. Barbara called me incessantly. At first, she yelled, "Are you happy now? Your husband lost his job." I just replied, "Barbara, please speak to my lawyer," and hung up. A few days later, her tone softened, but not out of understanding. It was out of fear. "Lauren, despite everything, you and Vince were together for almost 10 years. If he goes to jail, you'll be the ex-wife of a felon. It'll ruin your reputation. Don't push him over the edge." I stared out Allie's window at the rain tapping against the glass. I didn't push him to do any of it. He has to own his actions. She stayed quiet, then hung up. I thought Vince would finally sit down and agree to the divorce. But a cornered person rarely takes the high road. They usually dig a deeper hole and try to drag you in with them. A masterclass in moral bankruptcy. One afternoon, a mutual friend called me in a panic. "Lauren, Vince just texted me some really dark stuff. I think he took a bunch of pills. You need to get to the condo right now." My hands turned to ice. Despite the anger and the pain, hearing the word suicide triggered a visceral panic. But I was no longer the woman who ran purely on bare emotion. I immediately called Marcus. "Marcus, Vince is threatening suicide. Should I go?" He paused for a beat. "You can go to verify his condition, but do not go alone in a legal sense. Turn on your voice recorder. Share your live location with your friend. Alert the building security. Do not sign anything, and do not touch any pills or papers without a witness. I followed his instructions to the letter. I sent my location to Allie, called Bob at the front desk, and asked him to be on standby. Then I took an Uber to the condo. The front door was unlocked. Vince was lying on the sofa, his face pale, but his eyes were tracking movement perfectly well. On the coffee table was an opened bottle of over-the-counter sleeping pills, a glass of water, and several sheets of paper lined up so neatly it looked staged. I stood a few feet away. Vince, do I need to call 911? He opened his eyes, feigning weakness. Lauren, you came. I just wanted to see you one last time. I glanced at the pills. A man about to die doesn't usually arrange his paperwork at perfect 90-degree angles. Excellent organizational skills, terrible execution. If you're critical, I'm calling an ambulance. He shot up quickly, grabbing my wrist. No, wait. Just listen to me. I don't want this to go to court or the cops. Just sign these papers, and I promise I'll disappear from your life. I looked down at the table. A waiver of marital assets, a non-disclosure and release of claims regarding financial inquiries, and a freshly printed power of attorney, leaving the signature line blank. I yanked my arm back. You faked a suicide to get me here for this? The guest bedroom door suddenly clicked open. Tyler Brooks stepped out, followed by another man in a suit carrying a briefcase. Tyler was still in his crisp white shirt, sporting that greasy, used car salesman smile. Miss Davis, please, let's all calm down. Vince is in a bad headspace. We're just trying to sign some internal resolutions to avoid misunderstandings. You're still married, let's not escalate this. I backed up toward the front door, slipping the deadbolt open. Tyler, I never invited you into my home and I am not signing a single thing. The man with the briefcase stepped forward. If you don't sign, you're just making it harder on Vince. Sometimes it's better to just play ball so everyone goes home happy, I glared at him. If this is your idea of peace, you can keep it to yourselves. I threw the door open and yelled into the hallway, Bob! Security, get up here now! Vince jumped up. Lauren, what the hell are you doing? I held up my phone. I've been recording since I walked in. My lawyer and my friend have my live location. Keep talking, let's get it all on the record. Bob and the building management arrived within seconds. Based on Marcus's prior advice over the phone, management called the Chicago police. When officers arrived, they took statements regarding unauthorized individuals in the unit, suspicious legal documents, and attempted coercion. When the cops walked in, Vince collapsed back onto the couch, defeated. Tyler Brooks's smile vanished. The papers on the table, the USB drive, and the printed POAs were all documented in the police report. Vince's fake suicide didn't save him, it just buried him deeper. After that day, the HELOC application was permanently flagged as fraudulent. Tyler was brought in for questioning by investigators looking into his brokerage practices. Haley was subpoenaed regarding the possession of my ID and documents. Vince lost his job, his industry reputation, and the facade of the respectable, mild-mannered guy he used to fool everyone with. Finally, he signed the divorce settlement. I kept full ownership of the condo and assumed the remaining mortgage. Between the documented gift from my parents, my salary payments, and the evidence of his misappropriation of joint funds and fraudulent loan attempts, he lost all leverage to demand a 50-50 split. He received a minimal buyout reflecting his actual proven contributions and surrendered all other claims. On the day we signed the final papers, Vince stared at me. Do you really not have an ounce of love left for me? I looked right back. I loved the man who gave me the last bite of his food. But you, I just want you to never exist in my life again. After the divorce, I completely overhauled the condo. I changed the physical locks, upgraded the smart home security, and wiped all access codes. I threw out the mattress and those awful bronze sheets. I repainted the bedroom a calming ivory white. Barnaby came back home. At first, he sniffed the perimeter to check his territory, then hopped up onto his favorite windowsill to bask in the sun. I threw myself into work. Our end-of-year media campaign was a massive success, earning me a promotion and a hefty bonus. The first thing I did was wire money to my parents in Wisconsin to help them fix up the old barn roof. Then, I bought myself a sensible, reliable car. Not to show off, but to remind myself that from now on, I was the one holding the steering wheel of my own life. Marcus Quinn asked me out to dinner once. He was kind, mature, and never made me feel pressured. But I politely declined. Thank you, Marcus. But right now, I don't need a new man. I need to find my own peace first. He nodded, smiling. He didn't push. That level of respect was a gift in itself. At the end of the year, I was back at O'Hare for another business trip. Before heading to my gate, I opened the camera app on my phone. The screen was crystal clear. Barnaby was asleep in a patch of sunlight, his tail twitching lazily. The living room was spotless, the curtains drawn back. There was no cheap perfume, no shadows, no deceit. I smiled, locked my phone, grabbed my suitcase, and walked toward my gate. Women can love, and women can sacrifice, but never hand over your documents, your finances, and your autonomy to anyone. Trusting someone is a beautiful thing, but trusting without boundaries is like handing someone a knife and begging them not to cut you. A betrayer might steal a chapter of your life, but they should never be allowed to forge the signature on your entire story.